Okay. So now we're learning Likkutei Sichot volume 18, the third Sichot from Matot. And we're in section 4, we're almost at the very end. And we said that the Rebbe says the reason that Rashi can't use Reb Moshe Adarshan's explanation that the possessive dot inside the hay of La, okay, even that is just a mouthful for people. There's so many things to remember, but it's a simple thing. You can see it. It looks very simple when you look at it. It looks like this. You can see it here.
Right, but it's not in the Torah, it's not in the Chumash.
Here, this is an root, you see? And you right away you see that it's something wrong with it, because it's missing the point, right? You see it right away.
I got the point.
So, the fact that it's missing, so he says it's because it didn't hold, right? In Novach's case, he called the city by that name, Novach, but then it reverted back to Knat. And you have two other places in Tanakh where you have this La without the point inside. You understand? Even understand that they knew Tanakh to this level. The Tanakh was being passed on from generation to generation at the level that people knew that there are three places, that's called the Masorah, and 3 places in the whole Tanakh where the La doesn't follow the Dikduk laws, and it's missing this point in the hay. So you have to see it to believe it, but that's exactly, that was it. Imagine someone saying they invented this in the 10th century when the Masorah was written down. Can you imagine somebody doing that and the other experts in Masorah like saying, oh yeah, sure, why not? It's a great invention. 3 places. What? How could you even think that way? Like clearly there was a tremendous effort to memorize all these special places, and that's what we call the Masorah, that on the side of a full Tanakh, it gives all these special indicators that this is a unique event that happens, this is a unique grammatical event, instance that happens only two more times. In any case, so by Boaz we said it can't be that it's low, because it's exactly the opposite. It was saying to her, no, you definitely should not be like a maidservant. I want you to be a wife. By Zechariah, we ended with the fact that it's also not the Pshuto Shemikra. Why? Why is this not the Pshuto Shemikra? So again, the Pshuto Shemikra here it is. So here it is in Zechariah. Vayisai Vayired. And I cast my eyes up and I saw 2 women coming out and wind in their wings. V'lahena knafayim. They had wings like the wings of a stork, and they were carrying a tub between heaven and earth. And I said to the angel who was speaking within me, where are they taking this tub? Vayomer elai, he said to me, livnot la bayit be'eretz Shinar, to build her a house in the land of Shinar. Who's her? One of these women. So 2 of them are carrying the tub to build a house in the land of Bavel. Shinar is Bavel. And the pshat is that it's for one of them. Which one? So we said that obviously this is a what you call
allegory.
What?
Allegory.
It's an allegory. So the understanding, according to the sages, is that it's talking about Chanufah and coarse behavior. And what do we call them? The 2 of them.
Gasut Ruach.
Gasut Ruach. Okay. So Chanufah and Gasut Ruach. So which one of them was the house being built for? For Chanufah. It wasn't being built for Gasut Ruach. Why for Chanufah? Because it was Chanufah, flattery. That is a trait that was always in Babylon. But because of certain things, from Elam it took a measure of coarse behavior. So who are they building it for? Only for the one who had a permanent residence in Bavel was Chanufah, was flattery. So says the Rebbe, V'chem b'pasuk livnot labayit. So in the pasuk to build her a house. Achem gasut ruach hayta b'Bavel ba'ofen ofeh. It was indeed the coarse spirit, the coarse behavior. End of Dalet.
We did that, but didn't we?
Okay, but we're repeating it again because you said you didn't remember. You want to go back again. So it's true that the core spirit had some measure in Babylon, but it wasn't permanent. And then it would fit that we say la for it, for her, okay, without the possessive, because it would indicate that it didn't stick. But like we just said, what the pasuk is talking about is building a house for chanufa, for flattery, not for the core spirit. so it can't be that it's rafeh. So this whole drush that Rav Moshe Adarshan said that it's there but it's not there, that's only by core spirit. That's not by flattery. By flattery, it was a permanent house. It didn't go anywhere. So why is it missing the possessive in the hay? It should have been la, like a complete, because the chanufa, that's what they built the house for. That was there all the time. That was a trait of Babylon always. וכמובן לפניכם בסעיף ב' מפירוש רש"י לגמרא שמכך שנאמר לה בלשון יחיד ולא להם בלשון רבים מוכר שהם דבר אלא דבר אחד בלבד, חנופה לחודה, כי חנופה לא השתרבו בלהטם, היא נשארה בבבל תמיד, וכן אי אפשר לפרש שלה ללא מפיקה בלשון יחיד, רומזת לדבר נוסף שהיה כאן באופן רפה. So we can't explain here that the pshat, again, pshat cannot be that the la is talking about coarse spirit, which had a hold on Bavel for a while, had a hold on Babylon for a while, but not forever. And then it would fit the drush. But the pshat of the pasuk is, the plain meaning is that it's talking about the flattery. And the flattery was always there, so it doesn't fit at all. Okay? So we have these two instances that you can't use, the two other instances where this shows up. The la without the period and the hey, without the possessive, does not fit Rav Moshe Adarshan's pshat, according to Rashi. Okay, because Rashi is for the plain meaning. הדרשה שמדרש רות, okay, so that's, now that's it. אחרי שלהבין, לפי הדרשה שבמדרש רות, זה הפסוק לבנות לבית לשקר של שינר, בבל, והמילה לה בלי מפיק בהם הוא מלמד שאין לשקר תשועה. אם כך, יכול היה רש"י לקבל דרשה זו, שדומה לפירושו על ויקרא לנוכח, השקר קיים במציאות, אך באופן יפה, כי אין לשקר תשועה, אין לו קיום. He says there's another Jewish.
ינקל. אני עובד במקום וחסר להם מזוזות, אבל הם מסרבים לקנות מזוזות אלה אם כן, זה עם קבלה רסמית, פורמלית. אתה יכול למכור לי עם קבלה וכולי?
כן, אבל יש מחסור. על כמה מזוזות מדובר?
3. יש מחסור. יש לך מזוזות? לא, אני צריך 3.
אני אומר, אני רץ אחרי דבק, אין מזוזות, זה משהו מטורף. אני רץ אחריו, אין מזוזות.
טוב, נדבר.
בעיקרון אפשר, כן.
So we saw that there's another medrash, apart from what the Gemara says.
Where?
Until now we've been talking about the Gemara in Sanhedrin, about Zechariah. It's talking about flattery and coarse spirit. But there is another drush. And what's confusing here is that it's in Midrash Ruth. So you think it would be about Ruth, but it's not. It's about Zechariah. And there it says, "Livnot labayit la-sheker shel shina." That the meaning of this allegorical prophecy of Zechariah is not about flattery and coarse spirit, but rather is about deceit, lying.
Yeah, good midas in that way.
Yeah, bring all the good midas. Not, right? So the deceit, what does it say? Why does it, and this medrash says, so why does the hey not have the possessive point in it? It says the reason is because en la sheker teshua, because deceit can never bring salvation. It never works out. Deceit never finishes properly. So Rashi, so says the Rebbe, that Rashi could have accepted this drasha and then used Rabbi Moshe Adarshan's explanation, because this would fit. According to this drush, we're talking at this house that they're going to build is a house for deceit. And then it would fit perfectly because they brought deceit to Babylon. And deceit has a non-possessive hay because the house would never stand really. Okay? You would build the house and it would fall down. זה היה מתאים גם מפירושו של רש"י לגמרא שבנבנות לבית הכוונה היא לעניין של חנופה, כי גם חנופה היא שקר. And now we could have said that flattery is of the same quality as deceit. Flattery also works for a while, and then it falls. So you could have said this instead of saying it about core spirit and saying that it was there and then it left. You could say that it's not about the fact that the bad attribute was, or the bad type of behavior was in Babylon and then it was there no longer. You could say it's a type of behavior that every time that you use it, in the beginning it seems to work, and then it falls apart. And then that would have worked for Chanufa also, would have worked for flattery just as well as for deceit. Kigam Chanufa is shekel, because flattery is also a form of deceit. As Rashi himself explained, that flattery means that they show themselves as if they are good people. So why didn't Rashi do this? So it says the Rebbe, because this would raise another question. What would be the new question? מדוע הדגש הוא רק לגבי חנופה ולא לגבי גסות הרוח אשר ירדה לבבל, ואדרבה יותר מאשר השקר באופן רפה השתרבו בדעתם כאמור לעיל. So he says, in that case, why would you say that this is not relevant also to core spirit? Because both of them came down to Babel. That's what we see. We see that there were two winged women that went out, meaning these two bad attributes that went down to Babylon. So the core spirit also went down. And in that case, the la should have been in the plural. Because both of them, again, if you're only talking about the fact that did it have a permanent residence or not, so then you can say it in the singular, because the core spirit did not have a permanent residence. But if you're talking about the fact that these things, you start them, and they don't work out, they start working in the beginning, and then they don't work out, so it's true about both core spirit and the flattery. So it should have been in the plural, if that was the meaning, of the allegory. מקרא שהמילה לה נאמרת בלשון יחיד, שמדובר כאן רק על דבר אחד, חנופה מובן, שאין הכוונה לעניין זה של אין לו תשועה. So, first of all, because it's in the singular, so it's separate, it's distinguishing between them. So you can't distinguish between flattery and with core spirit when it comes to if it works out or not. They both don't work out, so it should have been in the plural. And ב' כוונת הפסוק היא לירידת חנופה לבן באופן קבוע שלא כגסות הרוח אשר השתרבו מדעתם. And we have to go back to saying that the reason that it's in the singular is because it's talking about whether it had a permanent residence, whether this negative trait was permanently in Babylon or not. And in that case, there was only one of these traits that was permanent in Babylon. Okay? So that's the cheshbon. So he says it doesn't fit the pshat. So he closed that off. לפי כל האמור לעיל, מובן גם מדוע מקדים רש"י את הפסוק מגילת רות לפני הפסוק מספר זכריה. So we also asked another question. Why does he bring the sources, the other two places where there's no point in the hay of La? Why does he bring it in the wrong order of the Tanakh? He should have brought the first Zechariah and then Ruth. Why does he first mention Ruth and then Zechariah? So he says, now we'll answer that question. How do we answer this? בפסוק ואומר לה בועז אשר במגילת רות הדרש עצמו הוא ההפך מן הפשט. לפי הדרש הכוונה שבאומר לה ויאמר לא, כדילג. ולכן שואל רש"י דרש זה בתחילה כי הוא רחוק יותר מן הפשט מאשר הדרש של הפסוק לבנות לבית. So as we saw, in Ruth, the la becomes lo, mamash lo, but not as a drush, as a pshat. So therefore he has to first of all take care of that, because there it's much further from the way that he's explained things. He's explained things that the la means a little bit yes, a little bit no. So first of all, he has to take care of that it really doesn't fit Ruth. It really does not fit Ruth, because in Ruth it means literally no, and it's not like half and half. It's not ambivalent. But in the case of building or a house, אשר מתאים לדרך הפשט של המילה לה רומזת למציאות רפה, ישתרבו וילעתם, או אין התשועה, יש קשה להסביר כך מדי שהפסוק מדבר בלשון יחיד, תחילה בדין זכריה, the problem is a little less difficult, because really we do mean there that it's ambivalent, it is and it isn't, but there the problem is again that it doesn't fit the pshat, because it should have been on the core spirit and not on the chanufa, or It should have been about Chanukah as sheker, and that doesn't fit the fact that it's in the singular, not the plural. So again, the problem in Ruth is bigger. This explanation that La means a little bit low doesn't fit Ruth at all, and in Zechariah it fits a little, but it doesn't fit perfectly. So first of all, you take care of the place. You say here it doesn't fit at all. So that's why I mentioned Ruth first. Okay, so that pretty much is the hard part of the Sichot. Now the harder part. Okay. So what do we learn from this in Chassidus? Okay. From this whole, it's very technical, but you have to learn that also. All three instances, what they do have in common is that they're talking about states of non-holiness, states that are non-sacred. What do we mean? In our parsha, so it's talking about a city, Knat, that originally belonged to the Amorites. In Ruth, it's talking about the Ruth, the Moabite. She's a woman who's from a nation that we're not allowed to, at least theoretically, admit into the Jewish people.
Only the men.
Okay, they didn't know that back then. They didn't know that.
Boaz knew it.
What?
Boaz knew it.
So Boaz knew, that was the whole Chiddush. But you had a girl here whose conversion was contested. And you didn't know if she was really admissible or not. And certainly in Zechariah we're talking about two very negative traits, flattery and coarse spirit, and the deceit in Bavel. So they're all talking about negative things. Then now we're going through a transformation. Okay? So first of all, it's written to her, without the possessive, to teach us that anything whose origin is not holy, is not sacred, has an ambivalent existence. It's not a permanent existence. Don't count on it to exist necessarily the day after tomorrow. Only holiness has concrete and everlasting existence. But things that are the opposite of holiness, they do not have real existence, and therefore have no being, and they cannot be sustained. And he mentions here in the footnote, to see the Rebbe Rashav's famous almost last Farbrengen, which was Reshit Goyim Amalek. It's a famous one when he was in Rostov, and they had the KGB agents came into the room with their guns, and they were listening to what he said. And so he said, no problem. He opened his coat, and he said, shoot me if you want to. He said, I'm not afraid of you. Of course they didn't shoot him, but he was making the point, that Amalek has that this thing that's the opposite of holiness has no existence, cannot be sustained. About this, Rashi says, now we're explaining this according to Chassidus, not according to Rashi. Rashi said what he said, we understood the plain meaning of what Rashi said. Now he's saying, according to Chassidus, what Rashi is saying is that I wonder what Rav Moshe the Darshan would say about this verse, and Boaz said to her, and livnot labayit, and to build her house. אכן בפסוקינו שבו מדובר על התקפיה, שלעומת זה, וילכוד, ללא הפיכתו לקדושה, מתאים הרמז שלה ללא מפיק בהן, הרומז לכך שהמציאות שלעומת זה אינה מתהפכת. It says, in our case, when he named the city, it was a city of idolatry, and he renamed it Noach. And he wanted to, in that way, turn it into something that would exist. You see that it didn't exist. When he reverted back to its holy name. So in a sense, he wasn't able to. So there, he did it not with force, with itkafia. He renamed it. So the idea that la means that it's an ambivalent change, yes or no, we're not sure. So that fits there. Why? Because we see that the negative entity, whatever, in this case the city, did not turn into something holy. And in 2 other cases, the difference is that Ruth was admitted as a convert, and that Babylon was where they were in exile. So it held them. Okay? So let's see this. Not only was Ruth converted, and her conversion was accepted, she became the mother of the kingdom. So she elevated to the highest levels. Until the point where she is considered to be like one of the matriarchs. And what's the source for that? What's the source for that? He doesn't bring a source here.
Boaz said that his two wives, one of Leah, one of Rachel. So
that is,
Rachel.
They were blessed. She was blessed that Hashem should bring you into His house the way that He brought Leah and Rachel into the house of Jacob. So she was compared to the matriarchs.
Said Rachel first.
כן, נכון. וכן לבנות לבית, השקר שבבן, משמעות הדברים בפנימות, לשקלה ותר שבתלמוד הבבלי. So what does it mean that the deceit that was, or the flattery, whatever, that wasn't in Babylon stayed there, and it was used? What is it really saying? So the explanation he says here, again, this is according to Chassidus, this is an incredible understanding of this, of the Sugya in Sanhedrin, that the flattery and the deceit went into the Babylonian Talmud. It was elevated in the Babylonian Talmud. How do you elevate these things? He says when you're learning in the Babylonian Talmud, there's a lot of false starts, false positions, and you have to discount them, and you have to show that they're not right. So you're using the flattery and the deceit in order to understand the truth of Torah. It says at any level, when you say a svara, when you say a rationalization, an explanation of the problem, and it's not the correct one, the correct explanation, there's a bit of deceit in it. There's a bit of flattery in it. It doesn't hold. But the fact that it doesn't hold, it helps you understand the truth better. אשר נשתלשלו בחושך אפילו בשקר, it says in Torah Or. ודווקא לידי העניין של במחשכים ושיבתי, זה תלמודה שבהם מגיעים לבנות לבית, הדרגה הנראה ביותר בתורה, דרגת בית שבתורה, בית נאמן. And it's specifically because of that pseudo-deceit in the Babylonian Talmud that you come to the higher understanding of the truth of Torah. And so you build a house that way. So here we have two cases where the opposite of holiness became holy. That's not like our case in our parsha, where it didn't become holy, where it went back to being Knat, it went back to being an Amorite, idolatrous city. So you can't say that it should have been a possessive law. It should have been that it worked. It did do what it was supposed to do. So you can't say it was ambivalent. Because whichever way you look, the impurity of the deceit, the impurity of Ruth, the convert, it completely nullified. It wasn't there anymore. And so it's, like we said, it's entirely not. Meaning the negative was completely nullified. So therefore, what are you left with? With possessive. That now it was really to give her fully. So he's saying it's not all the problems that we said. Really, in those two cases, in Ruth and in Zechariah, at least according to Chassidus, there should be a possessive point inside the head, because it was given fully, meaning it was something that stood completely because it was transformed into holiness. And on the contrary, what's the main point? Then when you take something that was negative and you turn it into something positive, and say something that was impure and you turn it into something that was pure, when you take something that was the opposite of holiness and you turn it into holiness, that actually has more sustainability than anything in the world. It's the most sustainable. That's what a person should strive for. It's not only to deal with the things that are holy in and of themselves. It's to take those things that are impure and unholy and turn them into something holy. There's a pasuk that says this in Iyov, and he says, "Mi ten tahol mitameh lo echad." Who will give the pure from the impure? Not one. So what's it talking about? It's talking about Avram. It's talking about Avram Avinu. Who did Avram come from? Came from Terach, the biggest idolater in the Middle East. Who built the nation of God? Avram. Why? Specifically because he came out of Terach. So that's the example here. The things like Ruth and like the Babylonian Talmud, that he took the negative qualities, the negative origins and so on, and he turned them into something holy. They are the ones that sustain the holiness for eternity, even more than holiness just by itself. And that's what you should strive for. So that's the end of the scene.
It's called Yifsoim.